So I was doing some preliminary research for my dissertation, and I kept coming across letters from these Americans on this isle who kept running afoul of Cuban authorities. So these Americans moved down there believing it's American territory, and what they hope to do is turn it into a resort location. They hope to turn it into a winter home. They hope to turn it into an area of businesses. A lot of them moved down there to try to grow citrus for export back to the United States. So they think that this is the next frontier of American territory. So in March 1904, the United States and Cuba signed a new treaty, the Hay-Quesada Treaty. Cuba administers the isle as if it were sovereign Cuban territory. Americans are still allowed to live there. And what they do is they hope that they can somehow convince the U.S. Senate someday to reject the treaty. So these Americans who live down there, they try to Americanize the isle, they try to start their businesses, they start up a number of institutions, they start churches, social clubs, schools, newspapers, and so forth to try to really Americanize the place. So there is, to some extent, Cubans do want Americans in the country. The Cubans are only too happy to be able to sell land in vast quantities to Americans to make money. They're also providing jobs to local farmhands for the clearing of land, for the construction of groves, for planting trees, for harvesting, and so forth. So they do provide a very significant economic service. But where Cubans seem to draw the line is at annexation. And when Americans begin to kind of push back and make a case for annexation, this is where Cubans draw the line. Americans who are living on the isle chafe at this Cuban authority. Because these Americans come in believing that the United States, that this island was or would soon become formal U.S. territory. But meanwhile, Cubans believe that, no, this is part of Cuban territory. And so this is where the tension comes in. And the tension is really what underlies, I think, the first quarter century or so of the American involvement on the isle. By the mid-1910s or so, some of these citrus developments start to come to fruition. But the thing about this area of the world is that there are quite a few hurricanes that come over. And so every few years there would be hurricanes that would periodically wipe out the citrus. But when the hurricane of 1917 happens, this wipes out a number of citrus developments. And businesses, a lot of American businesses fail. And so they're losing money, and a lot of Americans begin to go back. In 1925, the U.S. Senate finally ratifies the Hay-Quesada Treaty, making it official that this is indeed sovereign Cuban territory. So the dream that a lot of these annexationists had held for so long, that the United States would somehow, someday, lay claim to this island, that dream is gone. This is followed in 1926 by yet another, even more devastating hurricane. So that you get, by the end of the 1920s, only a few hundred Americans are left on this isle. And then there's a revival in the 1950s. There is another group of Americans that begins to come in as tourists, as missionaries, as teachers at the American Central School. And they are looking to buy homes on the isle as a second home. They spend part of their year there, but they are not annexationists by any means. And Americans in the 1950s are one of a number of different nationalities that are living on the isle. And so it's a very kind of cosmopolitan place in the 1950s. And this is also coming at a time when the Cuban government is trying to bolster the tourist industry to help with the Cuban economy. And so there are some steps taken on the Isle of Pines to try to turn it into a resort location. And this seems to be what's taking place in the 1950s, right up until 1959 with the Cuban Revolution, and then at that point everything changes.